Is Donald Trump a fascist? A lot of people have been throwing around the F bomb, and by F I mean fascist, in relation to Donald Trump. And this is an important question. The term fascist has really degraded from its original meaning. It's very amorphous. It can be used just to shut down anybody you oppose or disagree with. So what is fascism? Because before we can answer the question, is Donald Trump a fascist? We have to ask ourselves, what is fascism? The term fascism usually refers to the system of government in place in Italy and Germany during the 1930s and 1940s, and is also used to describe Spain as well under Franco. So let's take a look at Italian fascism, which I think is a really good model of fascism in general. So Benito Mussolini started his political career, political life as a socialist. His father was a socialist, and Mussolini was as well. He was a a newspaper editor for a socialist publication and pretty successful. It went from 20,000 to 100,000 circulation over his tenure. And Mussolini broke from the socialists over the war issue. Uh, Socialists in Italy were opposed to the war. They were sort of peacenik types, as socialists are often want to be. And and Mussolini broke with them. He was pro-war and more nationalist. So he represented a more nationalist, um, aggressive, bellicose socialism, as opposed to the people that he broke with. So under socialism, of course, there's various models. You ask 10 socialists, they'll give you 10 different answers of what socialism is. But at least during the 1930s and 20s, and in the lead up to fascism becoming sort of the dominant uh, alternative to capitalism in in Europe or Central Europe. Uh, so under fascism, the state played a dominant role in society. You had what was sort of an unholy alliance of corporations, big business, labor unions, and the state, like a tripartite, with the state, very much in the driving seat. And so, really, all interests in society were subservient to the state and to the party. Of course, fascism under Mussolini and under Hitler, you had a single party rule. The Nationalist Socialist Party in Germany and the Fascist Party in Italy. So fascism and socialism were sort of rivals in the minds of intellectuals. The 19th century, the dominant ideology had been liberalism. And liberalism in the context of 19th century Europe meant free trade and free markets, no grants of monopoly, no special privileges for the political elite, just competition in the economy, free and open competition, and individual rights. Uh, Liberalism was basically a reaction against absolutism, the sort of authoritarian rule of the king, the all-powerful king that was in place before it. And and liberalism was all about individual rights and ideas like free speech and freedom of religion, minimal government, sound money, like a gold standard. And liberalism was very powerful. It changed how society was organized in Europe. First, you had the Netherlands, the Dutch. They were the first sort of modern liberal society. They were a nation of merchants and very prosperous. You know, they were doing a lot of trade over the seas in England and the Industrial Revolution, and a lot of social transformation, a massively growing population. You know, it's a real time of change, and there was a lot of poverty at the time. I mean, there's always been a lot of poverty throughout history, and what happened was um, because conditions were getting better, um, like throughout the Middle Ages, you know, there's been slow and steady progress as capital accumulated. So capital being uh, man-made factors of production. Okay, so steadily you would have capital accumulation. It wasn't very quick, you know, but somebody would build a rake, you know, and 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 that rake would enable or a shovel or whatever would enable the farmer to be that much more productive. And over time, this builds up. Um, so that enabled the population to grow. And during the 17th, 18th century, there's this growing population, and and everybody's most people are very poor, you know, and they're working in the factories and very hard working conditions. Things are getting better actually quite rapidly as you enter into the factory system. Laissez-faire capitalism, creating a lot of wealth, and some people are getting very rich, and others are struggling. You know, they're working really long hours in the factories, like 11, 12 hours, 6 days, 7 days a week. You know, they're not getting paid very much money, um, and things are getting better, but they're getting better sort of. They're getting better, but they're still very bad. And so people thought, well, maybe there's a better way. You know, maybe if because it's sort of intuitive. You know, when you have some obscenely rich people, you know, and everybody else is poor, and you think like, well, you know, if we just divide the rich people's wealth up among the poor, and then the poor won't be as poor, and who really cares about the rich guy? You know, he doesn't have his stuff anymore. Uh, so it's kind of intuitive, and you can see how, you know, especially the poor, people working 60, 70 hours a week, you know, and they see other people, they don't have to work at all. They're just sort of riding around in their carriages, having a great time, you know, drinking brandy. And you got to think, like, why is society organized in this manner, you know? And so what happened was during the 20th century, there was a rejection of capitalism and liberalism. And the only question really, at least in Germany, in Austria and in Germany, I mean, Austria or uh, was the only question was, you know, is it going to be fascism or is it going to be socialism? There was no, there's very few people left that believed in capitalism, in liberalism. This was on the way out. So so most people are familiar with the political order of fascism, with the violence and the rhetoric and the marginalization of the other and the glorification of the nation state. They're familiar with the political nationalism and the dictatorship, the authoritarian nature of fascism. That's well understood, but I think the economic order of fascism is less understood. So the economic order was just a very powerful centralized government and a very powerful one party political system, and the whole of the economy was really organized by the state. So if there was some businessman and he would get orders from the government, you got to produce this amount of whatever product or sell it for this price. If he was sort of resistant or critical, they would just take him out. He would be replaced by high-ranking party officials, and and he would be gone. The firm was still there, the company was still there. It's still private, but its private owner is a high-ranking party official. So it's really the government, the party. They own and control everything, but they left this structure, the sort of capitalist structure intact, and they're just sort of barking orders at everybody. And I think once you understand that, then the difference between state socialism, like you had in Russia, and fascism in Italy is economically um, is not really that much different from the government nationalizing everything and then giving orders and telling people what to do, versus the party sort of seizing ownership of these companies covertly, and the government still issuing orders on what everybody's going to produce and how they're going to sell it. It's really fundamentally the same thing in terms of the economic structure. There's some differences, but the similarities greatly exceed the differences. So fascism really is a variant of socialism. It's a variant of this idea of having the state control the economy and plan the economy. They're both forms of central economic planning. One writer suggested that the reason why German socialism, German National Socialism. That's the other thing, is the nationalist element to fascism is so much more pronounced in Germany. The Aryan people under Mussolini, it was like the Roman thing. The Italian civilization, very ethno-nationalist, racist, bigoted. Whereas, of course, the Bolsheviks, the communists, were, they were Marxists. They were class conscious revolutionary communists. So another way to describe fascism is non-Marxist socialism, because while Marx is a dominant figure in communist thought, Marxism and communism are not necessarily the same thing. Communism predated Marx, and certainly there's non-Marxist socialists, non-Marxist communists, anarchists. So one theory as to why socialism maintained this sort of capitalist shell, or facade, if you will, where businesses were quote unquote privately owned, even though they were controlled by the government, told what to produce, told what prices to sell, and high-ranking party officials owned the companies in some cases. So one of the explanations might have been that Russia, of course, a very large country with substantial natural resources, could afford to be much more self-sufficient than the advanced industrial German economy, which was highly dependent on imports and exports. So difficult for a communist state to trade and to trade well. So, so by leaving the businessmen in place and controlling them like a puppet master, you can facilitate in international trade a lot easier. The business owners, they have experience in uh, satisfying customers, customer demand, and they know how to do international trade. They know how to work with foreign parties, supply them with what they need. It's not the skill set necessarily of a government communist bureaucrat. So that was one theory that why Germany uh, developed socialism in the particular form that it did, the fascist form of Hitler's Nationalist Socialist Party. Okay, so I think we've covered what is fascism. It's a economic system where it's sort of the cartelization of the economy under the direction of the state. You've got the one party system. Um, Political violence is used to maintain order, to ascend. You have the nationalist element, the rhetoric, but it's a command economy. And I guess another aspect is military bellicosity. And Randolph Bourne was famous for, or Randolph Bourne once wrote that war is the health of the state. And so it makes sense, I guess, when you have a political system where the state is so dominant that the state is going to go to war. And in Mussolini's case, it fits the gestalt of like the Roman Empire that he was trying to emulate or just mimic, evoke. And throughout the 30s, before World War II broke out, it fascist Italy was highly aggressive, expanding all over its borders and into Africa. And likewise, in Nazi Germany, Hitler uh, was expanding. He wanted to uh, annex Austria and Czechoslovakia, and then Danzig. So, is Donald Trump a fascist? There's certainly elements of nationalism to Donald Trump's political rhetoric. He wants to make America great again, but most politicians are nationalist. That's not really saying that much. He certainly didn't have a bellicose foreign policy when he was president, and he could have. Certainly, enough other presidents did. As for, is he economically fascist? I mean, Kamala Harris is the one that wants price controls. Price controls were an essential feature of both Italian and German fascism, both because it fits the ideology of, the government sort of telling business what to do, but also because the wartime economy was buckling and price controls sort of held things together. Not that it's a good thing to have price controls, in the long run, it's a losing strategy. But in the short run, it can sort of work, like if you put rent control on apartments, you know, in the long run, this can lead to serious problems because if landlords can't charge whatever prices they want, um, then then fewer houses will get built. Instead, investors will invest in areas of the economy that aren't price controlled, and so you end up with prices going high, but they're controlled, so you just end up with shortages. And but it works for the people that are tenants already. You know, it doesn't work for the people that are looking for apartments or homes. So it can be a short term solution that causes long term problems. And that's what you saw in Germany after the war economy was shut down. Then price controls were lifted, and you had out of control increases in prices because there was so much money printed during the war. And then some people look at the situation and say, well, you lifted the price controls, you dummy, you know, you caused this problem. But no, that problem was there. It was just festering, and actually lifting the price controls allows it allows it to sort of run its course and reach normality. And the real problem is the printing the money. That's why the prices go out of control. Um, but hey, you got to fund the war economy. You got to do what you got to do. And another thing that people accuse Trump of doing that ostensibly was fascist was weaponizing the DOJ, um, which he never did. Actually, the Democrats did that to him. They're the ones that have been harassing him with lawsuit after lawsuit across the country. There's that spurious case where he was charged with bank fraud because he borrowed money from a bank. He put up his property as collateral for the loan, and they're saying he overvalued it, which it's just nonsense. I mean, the bank is entitled, I would say obligated, certainly for a loan of this amount, to do their own evaluation of the property's worth. You can't really say what a unique property like the Mar-a-Lago place is actually worth. That's impossible to objectively evaluate. It's all subjective. And the loan was paid, there was no issue. So they're really grasping at legal straws. And so this is exactly what the Democratic Party did against Trump. And they're saying that he was doing that, and so he's a fascist, even though I never saw him do it. He talked about it. I'm sure he talked about it. But the Democrats are actually doing it. I mean, frankly, economically, I don't think there's a huge difference between Trump and any other establishment politician, at least based on his record in office, from what I know of it anyway. So I think the claim that he's fascist is just completely without merit. And basically, the left uses fascism as a smear term for anybody they disagree with as a way of sort of shutting down dialogue. And I don't think most people that use the term even know really what it means, or they understand sort of the political end of it. They understand the violence, the jackboot thugs, the one party rule, but they don't really understand that economically, the left is much closer to fascism than the right. Things like price controls. Kamala Harris is putting that in. Government telling business what to do. The left loves regulation. They love government telling business what to do. That's like the raison d'etre. So yeah, I think that Donald Trump is not a fascist, but it is important to understand what fascism is.